evening, everybody. It's great to welcome such an enthusiastic crowd. I'm Peggy Fry, the Interim University Librarian, and I would like to thank you all for joining us here this evening. Tonight's program is held in conjunction with the Department of Art and Art History and will highlight our newest exhibition, A War to End All Wars, 100 Years Since World War I. We're delighted to have Dr. Elizabeth Prelinger here to speak with us about this multifaceted exhibition, of which she was the guest curator. Dr. Prelinger is the Kaiser Family Professor of Art History in the Department of Art and Art History and has taught and lectured globally for over 30 years. We will also have the opportunity to hear original music from the World War I era, performed by Georgetown students Laura Ratliff,
No problem.
Adam Boyamore, and Dalton Fowler. I'd like to thank Professors Anthony Deldana and Frederick Binkholder from the Department of Performing Arts for their work in arranging and organizing this special performance. I'd also like to thank Lulan Walker and Kristen Runge for their extensive and careful work in curating and installing this exhibition. Now please join me in welcoming Dr. John Buchtel, Director of the Booth Family Center for Special Collections.
I'd like to echo Peggy's welcome. Thank you all for coming. This is a special event for us here in the Booth Family Center for Special Collections because it highlights in an extraordinary way the complementarities made possible by having the University Art Collection, the University Archives, the Rare Book Collection, and the Manuscript Collection all together in one place under one roof. Because these rich and varied collections are preserved in this manner, as we mark the centennial of the First World War, the centennial of the close of the First World War, we are able to look back in time through the lens of the visual arts, artifacts, books, sheet music, photographs, letters, and other documents from the period, and of the history of Georgetown University itself. Our guest curator will be thanking the individuals in a moment, but I want to preempt her just enough to thank my entire department for collaborating so beautifully on what has been very much a team effort. And I want to single out one colleague who worked briefly for my department over this past year, Susan Laudicina. Are you here? Sue, thank you for being here. Sue worked for us on contract to catalog our collection of some 400 World War I posters. They're now fully described and accessible and available for research. Yay. and very well curated now. A brief word about our program this evening. After I introduce her a few moments from now, we'll have the privilege of hearing from our intrepid guest curator herself, Dr. Elizabeth Prelinger, about her exhibition, followed by a few minutes for questions. We then have a very special treat. Professor Frederick Binkholder from the Department of Performing Arts has arranged a special musical performance for us of World War I era songs. Some of it, all of it, some of it, most of it drawn from our collection. 3/4 of it drawn from our collection.
Oh, from your collection?
No,
100%.
from 100% from our collection. Okay. And we have a great sheet music collection. When the performance concludes, we invite you to view our exhibition while partaking of a reception in our exhibition gallery. Please note that the Leon Robin Gallery, which has the sheet music on display, will also be open during the reception. That's inside the glass double doors to Special Collections. We'll open it up as soon as we close the festivities in here. Please don't miss that part of the exhibition, since it's sort of tucked away a bit. We do ask that you refrain from bringing food and drink into Special Collections. So I think we have a place for you to set your drinks down when you go in. Please also be sure to pick up a copy of Liz's wonderful brochure. And now I have the great honor of introducing our wonderful guest curator, Dr. Elizabeth Prelinger. Liz is the Kaiser Family Professor of Art History in the Department of Art and Art History here at Georgetown, where she has taught for 31 years. Over the past 3 decades, she has written articles, exhibition catalogs, and book reviews, in addition to lecturing in the US and abroad. She teaches classes on German, French, and American 19th and 20th century art and World War I, and she has curated and co-curated important exhibitions on such figures as Edvard Munch, Käthe Kollwitz, and Paul Gauguin in major venues, not least the National Gallery of Art. We are very fortunate indeed to have our humble exhibition space blessed by such expertise and by such an eye. Liz is particularly interested in prints, and she co-taught with the founder of our fine print collection, the late Father Joseph Haller. And she continues to do so as often as possible with the current university art curator, Len Walker, drawing numerous examples from our collections as part of the process. Under Liz's tutelage, Georgetown students thus have the opportunity to learn about the artists and art movements they are studying with actual examples drawn from our collections right under their noses. We are particularly grateful to Liz for her generous loans to this exhibition from her personal collection. Yet one more piece of evidence that Liz Prelinger is one of our greatest faculty supporters here in Special Collections. Thank you, Liz.
John, I'm truly embarrassed. Thank you for such an amazing introduction. I just would like to start by thanking everyone for being here, and just as you echoed, Peggy, I'm echoing you with thanks for all my colleagues. I can hardly believe what a wonderful privilege it was to work with them. And I want you to look very carefully here, because this is not me. This is, as John said, a totally collaborative effort. Len, Kristen, the layout, choosing things, I like to think, a true collaboration, and I am so grateful and I feel so privileged for having that opportunity. So, you know, for now it's a threesome, and then we have a bunch of other people. Okay, let me put my things here for now. Okay, thanks, Fred. Okay, let's see, let me orient myself. All right, why now? Well, as John pointed out, this is the centennial year of the end of World War I. So we've had 4 years to work on things, and in fact, for the last, probably 10 years or so, venues in Europe and America have been producing scholarship at an amazing rate of every sort, with books, articles, websites, exhibitions. And what I wanted to show you here was that these are just a few things that I have gathered. My shelf gets heavier every month, but we have Uncle Sam welcoming us again, and John already brandished the brochure. Incredible, another production of Len and Kristen and their designer. But you'll notice Uncle Sam, U.S. government is, you know, pointing at you to join the, and sign up for the Army. But there's the Great Crusade, the legacy of the American Revolution. Some of you may have seen that at Anderson House, or the Met's exhibition on World War I, the visual arts, French illustrators. This one is World War I and the fight for the American mind, you start wondering how far you can go, but you realize that you can keep going farther and farther. And that's one of the things that was so remarkable about working with this collection. You delve deeper and deeper and deeper, and the curators helped me do that with their knowledge of their collections. And then this one, which I can't wait to look into, the Great War in small format. And this German catalog deals with things like medallions that were struck for various events in the war and small prints. So it's not just the victors of World War I or the Great War. You couldn't have known then that it was the first of two wars, obviously. But even the defeated belligerent Germany producing a catalog and trying to look honestly at, at what was going on. But it obviously is a very political issue. All right, so we have all this material in this amazing collection, as John was pointing out, in all these different fields. And Len and I had been going through, material and wondering what to do. So we went to Saxby's and had a cup of coffee. And it was over that cup of coffee that we came up with a thematic organization within which there are rough chronologies. And this is only one idea. We could have had many, many others, as you saw from the catalogs that I showed you, but you can read them here. We tried to have, the introduction to the war. It's a little non-chronological because though the war started in 1914 in Europe, America did not declare war until April 6th of 1917. And we didn't really get over there until late 1917 and the beginning of 1918, all right? So, but we included things like Uncle Sam, how can you not? And then Georgetown, which is a remarkable pod for which the university archivist, Lynn Conway, wrote the labels, weapons, combat life, life and culture, home front, and then silence at 11 a.m. on the 11th month, on the 11th day, okay? And that was the end. But it wasn't the end because a lot more happened. All right, so this is the process of the exhibition that I thought you'd be interested in seeing because the installation looks so effortless, but it's not. That's the talent of the curators. So here are the tables in the study room and the wonderful booth center, and we began laying things out to make sense. Not easy. And then here is another scene, moving them around, seeing how they're going to work. And again, the variety of objects, as John said, is what's remarkable, because we have here a poster of a woman, an American at a switchboard abroad. We have an ad, we have a cross of honor. We have right here a German book of poems, which is a very, how does one say? Well, it's a person who wrote about love and hate, and how can hate exist if you're loving your fatherland, so it's okay to hate the English. He was someone whom the Nazis liked very much later on in the decades. So that's something I found and thought it was pretty fun, sort of. And then here is what it looks like now. And if you haven't had a chance to look at the exhibition yet, you have an incredible treat in store for you. I know the objects and I'm absolutely mesmerized with how they're installed. So this is the result, moving from a cup of coffee to designing a layout and then installing it. Now, it's not my intention here, this is not a scholarly talk, to give you the history of World War I. You know, suffice it to say that we had the two sides. We had the Central Powers of Germany and Austria-Hungary empires and the Ottoman Turks. They wouldn't survive the war, those empires, the Central Powers, and then the Allies, France, Britain, ultimately America. So I'm being very brief there, but you can read more both in the brochure and in the labels. I'll say actually that it is a very label-heavy show. That's, I think, one of the fun things about working with a collection within a university is that you don't have to write just one sentence, or at least I didn't, but you can write more and have it really be a vehicle for learning. And I hope that's what people will get out of it. I just wanted quickly to show you a map so that you get a sense of where things were. This is the Western Front, and then here in the East is the, well, here with Russia, the Eastern Front. And my colleague, where are we? Yes, my colleague Allison Hilton had just visited Sarajevo there and stood in the footprints of the young Serbian nationalist who assassinated Crown Prince Ferdinand and his wife Sophie, which then was, you know, what was set off the tinderbox and started the war. That's a little sketchy, but you can find out more about it. Europe was being roiled with problems with mutual alliances, and so it was a complicated political situation right from the start. Now, here's one of the things that was, you know, so much fun, was looking at books. And John mentioned the rare book collection under Ethan Henderson. And Edith Wharton, you'll recognize her name, of course, from The Age of Innocence, Ethan Frome, the novelist. But she was in France. During that time, she basically lived in Paris for a lot of her life, and she helped with refugees and was rewarded by the French government. But this quote is really quite a remarkable thing to think about. One of the most detestable things about war, except death and ruin, is that everything is so visually stimulating and absorbing. Well, it is. It's sort of the horror that takes you out of your comfort level, or like a horror movie where some kid is going to go down in the basement and you say, don't go, don't go. But, you know, it sort of sets the tone for the artifacts and art that are going to be produced, because surely she wasn't talking about this sort of thing. And this is the real story, and I didn't even bring some of the really bad things because this is the afternoon. People want wine, but you know, the people who have been blinded by gas, you know, one of the progress weapons that was invented during World War I were poison gases, okay? And then the moon landscapes, utter ruins. When I was visiting the landscapes at one point, the battlefields, they showed us a tree, a lone tree, sitting amidst vast fields, and the tree had undergone so much shelling around it and foreign substances that it had petrified to the stone. I mean, extraordinary. Yeah, trenches, we associate, of course, the war on the Western Front with trenches. Look here, the trenches were so filled with rats that it became sport to catch them and show off how many rats you had. And then this is an American soldier. One of the big presences in World War I is barbed wire, which was rolled out to, keep the distance, which was sometimes very, very small, between the two fighting forces. You could, of course, get stuck there, and golly, I have too many anecdotes, but I have to keep going. But the tragedy of someone who's out there, possibly still alive, but not able to be rescued because you get picked off by a sniper. All right? So, I got a number of books, and I'm going to be honest here. My brother sent me 9 boxes of World War I books, among which are many of special interest and importance. And once I started delving into them, I find out about Richard Harding Davis, who was a war correspondent. But in this book with the Allies, which was originally published in 1914, he writes about how he has, he's over there, he's seen these things, he's giving you a warning about the military mad government of Germany, all right? And then here he has chapters where he talks about various of the depredations that the Germans have inflicted either on people when they invaded Belgium in 1914, one of which, and then into northern France, one of the things that they shelled was the great Cathedral of Reims, which was, the coronation church of France. Something like 29 kings had been crowned there, and its utter uselessness. It was just kind of a punitive thing, though they said there were snipers hiding in there, who knows, but this destruction of great monuments and also the great library in the Belgian city of Louvain that was destroyed, are things that, when the war was over, would be described as war crimes and things that Germany had to pay for. Now, one of the things is the importance of images in World War I, and in fact, it's extraordinary how many images were made of all sorts. For example, posters. I'm so glad those have all been cataloged. That's very exciting. World War I posters are extraordinary. I think there were about 2,500 different ones made in the US. I mean, hundreds and hundreds, and in other combatant countries as well. And a good poster, what does it need? It needs a big, simple design, color, big words so that it can transmit its message very quickly and succinctly. And here is an American one, again, 1918, because we got in late, but beat back the Hun. The Germans were called Huns by the Allies to refer back to Attila and the marauding hordes of Germanic tribes. So, we get it, they're bad. And then here, this face with its Prussian Pickelhaube, the Prussian spiked helmet, coming over on the other side of the sea, bloody bayonet. And then here, I've always been interested to see that, is a ruin. It could be of Reims, the cathedral. It could be referring to that. It's not quite clear. But those green eyes would scare anyone into buying a Liberty Bond, which was a bond you could buy from the government to help finance the war. All right, so you will find a lot of posters that emphasize that. Now, this is very misleading, and you'll see that when you look at the show, which is that this, Prussians massacring Belgians, all right, when they came in, and here's one throwing someone, I don't know whether it's a baby, against the wall, all the dead Belgians, and, you know, with the butt of his rifle. This is actually a very small print. So it's getting over a very big message, also in a fine print, okay? Which is interesting that the medium is of a high diction, if you want to put it that way, as opposed to a color poster, which was run off as, am I right? Oh, an offset, you know, in a big. So, yeah. Now, posters also, you know, they were used not just for war-related things like enlist or, you know, buy Liberty bonds or oppose the Germans in some way if we're talking about American posters, but also things on the home front. And I'm showing you, you know, the cute little American child who is saluting his bowl of either oatmeal or cornmeal mush, whatever. He surely hates it, but he knows he has to eat it because the point is to save the food for the soldiers, okay? And yeah, leave nothing on your plate. And it's interesting because at the time, Herbert Hoover, who was head of the United States Food Administration, said that food was second only to weapons in winning war. And when you think about it, it's very probably true. And I wanted to show you this little pixelated image of the little German girl who is holding a big peach pit, and it says, you know, collect fruit pits, because they were used, among other things, for filtering gas in gas masks. So, you know, use whatever you can in terms of materials, save things, because they do have a use. Yeah, another thing that we can look out for and that you can look out for when you're going through is representations of women, because we know that the whole situation for women changed during World War I. Women stepped into jobs that had been vacated by men, for one thing, and also there was the formation of different kinds of organizations for women, whether it was to help out on the home front or in the context of the army. And one of the things that betrays the organization and the striving for status was the creation of uniforms for women. One of my colleagues at American History works on women's uniforms, a very important thing. And here we have a switchboard operator, an American under the auspices of the YWCA. Hello girls, they were called. And then here are all the troops outside. She's busy with her work. How different, okay? These Howard Chandler Christie posters are hilarious, and you'll be able to see things like this, where he uses an image, you know, out of Delacroix, Liberty Leading the People or something, but, you know, what is it, wardrobe malfunction or something, you know, that might happen there, but, you know, trying by a sexy girl to have people buy bonds or fight. And this kind of image was used with moderate frequency, but I think it gives you the sense, you know, a sort of idealized female figure and a female who really represents some very important activity. Now, Lulen, where are you? Yes, there's Lulen, the art curator, and here's Kristen, who is her assistant. Did you find this? Because this is a very rare print.
It's an acquisition of the two coasters, over there,
Right.
the different versions.
Okay, so Lulen found this one, a very rare representation of an African-American soldier and an African-American fighting unit. Called Colored Man is No Slacker. And I will go into more about the Great Migration, but I actually have less time than I thought, so I'm going to, be a little more contained with the anecdotes. But anyway, here, slacker was not just meaning, at the time, someone who wasn't doing his work, but it also meant a draft dodger, okay? So that it has that meaning, and here is a very dignified man saying goodbye to his wife or sweetheart and going off to join the army. Actually, about 1 million African-American men signed up to enlist, and about 370,000 actually were inducted into the army. So there was a presence. If they hoped that it was going materially to improve their status, they were wrong. It wasn't going to, and they didn't fight in the same way that the white soldiers did, but they, any idea that the black population was not patriotic was certainly given the lie by their not excitement, but their willingness and readiness to defend their country. All right, Georgetown, and Lynn knows all about this. There's Lynn, the university archivist, and she's written the labels for this section. And the government wanted university campuses to mobilize. It couldn't be too soon. And under the encouragement of the Chamberlain Bill, universities did mobilize, and Georgetown was among that group. They even unfurled at, let's see, did I put the date on this? No, but a service flag here on Healy to honor the Georgetown students who had participated. It was made by the senior class at visitation, just sort of nice. And then here is a poem. But the star, if that's fair to say, was Stubby the dog. Okay, Stubby was a much decorated sort of bull terrier who, there were stories of him going out and biting the leg of the first German he saw and holding on as tightly as he could. And I wanted to show you, I went down to the Smithsonian because Stubby is down there. When he died, they eviscerated him and filled him up, the skin up with the ashes, sewed him back up together, and sometimes, at least, he's on view. But they also have a lot of his medals that he was awarded, the Croix de Lorraine and other kinds of honors that this dog received. But the important thing was that his master brought him to Georgetown. I guess he was a student, and he became the the mascot, and that's before Jack. Okay, so a real World War I hero. You can look at the whole Georgetown installation as well. Now, another thing, it's not surprising, but everyone was homesick. Everyone, certainly Americans, but the Europeans too, they weren't home. It was tremendously difficult, duh. And if you were under bombardment, sometimes for days at a time, the agony of that led to a lot of letters. There was no other way between families and soldiers. And this is a soldier. Hans Tunnel lived in Texas, and he wrote a lot of very interesting things. These are on loan from a Georgetown person, and he's very chatty, and he actually says, among all the other things that are going on, and remember, these letters could all be censored. They went through censors. But he says, lots of pretty girls in France, but they haven't got a thing on the American girls, okay? So you get things like that. And then I'm sorry, I photographed these through the plastic, but these are German field postcards where you could buy a printed card, a postcard, and send it home. And they are, on the whole, reproductions of drawings. Here, for example, made for this purpose. You'll see it in the exhibition. Someone is getting a haircut while another, you can see the spiked helmet, is fulfilling his sniper functions. So, again, America and Germany, people feeling the same. I love this. And this was one of the fun things about working with this collection and working with archival materials. You never know what people saved. And this person, again, on the label you'll see, saved this little style book from Hart, Schaffner, and Marx. The name may still ring a bell to some of you. The War and Your Clothes. Making this connection between buying good, expensive clothing and ultimately supporting the war that way, because you don't have to buy more and use up more wool. That is so clever. It's Don Draper clever. And here you have this very dandified young man in evening dress and dancing shoes, pulling out this uniform from the box, very beautifully tailored, but there in the background are the Marines, and that's a real poster. So to have that, he better get out there and fight. But to me, that's a kind of a neat find, and one can just keep going and find these things. How am I doing?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. Will you excuse me just a second? I think. Hold on. Oops. Does it go backwards or?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Let me shorten this a little bit and just show you that you're going to be looking at a section on weapons. And of course, the idea of the creation of these new types of weapons, from a howitzer to this wonderful thing here, which is body armor. I mean, plus ça change. It's, medieval armor that was designed by an American, Dr. Brewster, and they're trying it out. It is on the cover of a French photographic magazine from this era called The Mirror. And it was one of the first magazines to show a corpse in a photograph, because for a long while those things were not allowed. Stereoscopic photographs. It's funny when you think, you put them in and you look and it becomes 3D. It's like a parlor game. You'd use that to look at the Alps. And all of a sudden, you were looking at a dead German who's tangled in barbed wire. So you see the whole frame of reference is shifting, obviously. Let me see. Okay, well, the war finally comes to an end with an armistice that is signed between Germany and the Allies. And the war, an agreement to stop fighting. The guns stop. I told you 11/11 at 11 a.m. And the next thing that needs to be done is to create a treaty, all right? And the so-called Versailles Treaty is the one that has been said practically by some scholars, practically to lead to the problems of World War II. It was so punitive, well, the French, the Britain, look what they lost. But people like the economist John Maynard Keynes said this is not going to end well. And a levy of, over 300 billion marks was required to be paid. It did not get paid. And also the important thing was the so-called war guilt clause, which meant that the treaty insisted that Germany accept all the guilt for the war. And ultimately, they had to accede to that. And this is a wonderful piece from the James Brown Scott papers. He was a Georgetown law professor. And here is part, you'll see, secret of the Versailles Treaty being put together, and you can see all his own hand corrections. It's really history in the making, tremendously exciting. And I just wanted to say, and now I will be coming to an end, I think, is the cultural aspect. It's amazing. Such a horrible experience produced remarkable art, remarkable poetry, and remarkable music, which thanks to Professor Anthony Daldana, and where's Fred? There you are, Binkholder, we're going to hear some of, and to echo John, make sure you see the sheet music. But this book on art and the Great War, talking about art from every country, it came out in 1919. The year of the end, after the end of the war. Who knew that art would be so important, that it would come out so quickly thereafter? And then poems, of course, the high diction poems of the British, Wilfred Owen, and the famous poem by the Canadian John McCrae, in Flanders Fields, the poppies blow, etc. You know, all that area was covered with poppies. And in Britain, where, you know, Armistice Day is still celebrated, people still wear poppies. You may have seen the Field of Poppies. That was an art installation a number of years ago. And thanks, I guess, to Ethan's collecting, there is a gorgeous edition in the Georgetown collection. Here, and I won't dwell, are music covers, extraordinary music, produced tremendous amounts of popular songs, keep up morale, and music played not only in the home, but at the front, and you'll see examples of that. I'm almost done here. Okay. Battlefield tourism. I mean, right after the war. I bought this. This was my tourist book when I went to visit you guys, okay, Rome, so here it is. But this is, you know, a little bigger. It's a travel book to take you around the battlefields, and here it has pictures and paths. You know, it's funny because it was dangerous then and dangerous now. So to say, I think one more thing, among the papers at Georgetown are the John Knox papers, and I have to find out more about John Knox, actually, because he was really weird. He was a rabid autograph seeker, and his room, by his own admission, you'll have to read this, was covered with photos and autographs. And not only did he collect these, but he wrote to Hindenburg, Clemenceau, and the deposed Kaiser. asking for their autographs. And you ought to read this. You know, there's nothing that I'd like more. I mean, whoa, it's very strange. And just to come to a conclusion here, there are so many aspects to the legacy of World War I. The current demarcations of countries in the Middle East for which we continue to, with which we continue to struggle. And that's only one of a million things. But I did want to show you 1931, and a printmaker in New York is showing this group of named soldiers trying to get a few coins in New York City from just bicycling around. You'll see this one has to pedal with his hands because he has no legs, no arm, a peg leg, and the injuries of World War I were astonishing. One good thing that came out of those injuries was a lot of work on reconstructive surgery. So there's a lot in the balance, and what we hope is that as you go through the show, you'll find yourself immersed in what was going on so many different levels of this very interwoven selection of objects. So thank you. And
Stay up. We have a few minutes for questions
Let
now.
me just put these
Is this here for you?
Yes. Is there anything I can try to answer? Yes, Warren, what are you going to ask me?
Well, just out of curiosity, do the collections have, you know, there was a lot of, I see you have sheet music in terms of popular culture. Was there anything in terms of movies, movie stills, you know, Chaplin, everybody went out and did War Bond Drive.
Right, they did.
Children's books, cartoons, comics, things like that.
Right. Of course, there was a lot of, is that a poppy?
Yep. Yeah.
That's fabulous. That's great. Yes, there of course was a whole culture of children's things. I put in there a sort of young boys adventure book.
Oh, cool.
Okay, so there's that. There's also the Belgian, or is he Dutch? Golly, Peter. The Louis Ramaker.
Ramaker, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cartoons. So
Oh, okay.
we did
Oh, great,
some of
yeah.
that. With regard to movies, Luann, I'm not sure whether they're film. No. The answer is no. Okay. I think, yes, Sarah.
Well, we're now in the longest war that the United States has experienced, and do you see in American artists a similar reaction or not?
You know, it's a good question. There's just so much produced, but I don't really know the answer. I mean, obviously we've had tons of novels and things like that, but in terms of the visual arts, you know, I don't know. Does anyone know more about that?
The American Army has combat artists
Thank
who
you.
accompany troops,
Right.
as well as photographers and historians.
Right.
But they do drawings as well, but that probably has not yet been made available in the public in this long war.
Yes, that's right. And even, you know, during World War I, there were 8 official artists, you know, who went over, and their very realistic drawings are in American history. So you're absolutely right. The branches of the military have their things. Thank you.
Many movies.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, think of La Grande Illusion and all others, and Charlie Chaplin, as Warren said. So the film culture was crucial. Barbara, did you?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think he answered it. The Air and Space Museum
Thank
has
you.
a wonderful exhibit on those artists that were embedded in the war. First time it's ever been shown.
Yes,
Thanks
thank
to the
you.
curator there.
Yes, yes.
And for movies, never forget the Im Westen nichts Neues, all quiet on the Western Front.
Absolutely. I mean, excuse me. Yeah, you know, all quiet on the Western Front, crucial. And, you know, I didn't talk much about those German books, including Storm of Steel by Ernst Junger, one very sort of pro-war, and the Remark being very pacifist. So, yeah, there was a whole dialogue of things like that. Thank you. Yes?
The war actually, American involvement took place basically over 2 years in the life of Georgetown University, 2 full academic years. Is there any, and I know during World War II, I've seen photos that essentially the campus was taken over by the Army as an officer training facility. Is there any or much material in the university archives about life on campus, student life, to the extent to which it was affected during the course of the war?
Now, I'll try to say something, and then Lynn Conway will probably have something to say too, which is that some of the things, like that picture of Healy with the service flag, are in the Georgetown College Journal. And if you leaf through those during this time period, you can find out a tremendous amount about what was going on at the time, which I didn't do. Do you?
Yes, so the College Journal, as Liz just said, was the student newspaper at that time, so there's coverage there. We do have photographs, and we do actually have a lot of records, because yes, basically the same thing happened with World War I as happened with World War II. Most of the students on campus actually were cadets rather than civilians.
And you'll see, I think we have it in the show, the drilling in Ryan, Jim, and stuff like that. Yeah, yes.
I was going to ask you, I spent time in Eastern Europe, and of course modern Romania was formed at the end of World War I. But I was wondering if in your research you ran across, there was some fantastic music that came out besides over there. And I was wondering if you ever heard a song called Molly, My Molly O. I lived in Scotland, I was in Scotland for a while, and it was a really powerful song. And there's a more recent one, I don't think dates from that time, but I'd be interested in what you ran across, the songs from that time. There's a recent one called Young Willie McBride, Green Fields of France. It's not from that era, but it's about that. You know, and there was also a great movie called The Soldier's Story. It was about World War II, about the black regiments and the black soldiers. And the Union grew up, they were in the really desperate wars. We called up hundreds of thousands of black soldiers to fight for the Union Army, the Civil War, and then millions to fight in World War II. And the guy says, the black DI says to his black recruits, the last war, meaning World War I, didn't change things as much as it looked like it was going to, but this war is going to change everything. You're talking about World War II. But it'd be interesting to look into what that whole interaction, because I bet a lot of black soldiers when they signed up were thinking just like when they came out of the Civil War, they had a fighting chance to really be free and to really transform society. Got rolled back, but I wonder if that'd be a whole interesting area to research.
Yeah, the answer is I don't know, but I think the thing that's even more important is that you have suggested how much more. I mean, this is just a surface thing compared with what one can find out. And obviously people have made inroads, like with Soldier's Song, but how far can one go? Anthony, you don't know about this song, do you?
No, I haven't heard of the song, but there were African-American bands that were sent over to, and one of the most famous was the Shoot Fly Regiment, and there's actually a lot of research being done right now about them.
Did you write about that in your label? Oh, okay.
That was a while ago.
Professor Deldana, professor of music, wrote the labels for the sheet music that's in the Leon Robin Gallery, so make sure you see it. The illustrations on the covers are unbelievable. So yeah, thank you for doing that. I guess one more question. Anyone want to? Yes, hi.
Hi. I wanted to ask about art for and by the colonial subjects at this time. So was there like propaganda and recruitment art being sent around the world in different languages? And have you come across any interesting examples?
You know, that is such a great idea, and I would have to check to see, you know, because there are people who are working on all these issues. I'm glad you brought up the colonial troops, because remember, the British Empire, there were troops coming from all over. Troops of color, troops of not color, and the answer is I don't know, but it's a great topic for research. Len, is there anything that you know of in your collection that, well, Sarah, yeah.
We have images of colonial citizens being sent over to clean up the aftermath of World War I, clean up the ordnance that we left behind at great sacrifice.
At great sacrifice. Sarah is one of the curators at the Library of Congress, so that might be a good talk for you to have. Talking quickly about ordnance, that's one of the things that was so scary about those guidebooks. The woods and everywhere were full of explosive devices that hadn't yet gone off. And to this day, a farmer plowing his field will happen upon something dangerous. And when I was going through those areas, you will still see little piles of war material on the side of the road, and it's picked up regularly. So, Bart, did you have anything to add to that, or?
The manufacturer of the stuff here. The manufacturing of ordnance here.
I meant in general, regarding that ordinance in the northern France. And
it's all over the place, it still is. And actually, local farmers are establishing sort of personal museums.
Are they?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Some of which is an exhibit at the Smithsonian in the art exhibit.
Okay.
The World War I art exhibit.
Yes, I was actually going to mention that as well. Bart is a military historian and also one of the curators at American History. So if you have any questions, he too is a remarkable resource and one of my mentors.
So
I
thank you
guess we're
again,
done.
Liz. Turn it over to Fred Binkholder.
So thank you all. As you were mentioning about all of the music from this time period, it is quite a task to narrow everything back. To just choose, we chose 4 selections for tonight's little concert, mini concert. And so we've chosen some that you know and some that you don't know that you will find absolutely heart-wrenching, but then also there's some humor in some of the others. So the first thing we're going to do is that Laura Ratliff is going to be singing a tune that was written in 1917, just when the US began the fight in Europe. And this was probably the most popular tune, American tune, that was produced. And you probably already know what it is. It was written by George M. Cohan, and this is Over There. And I'm going to go over and turn pages, but I'll let you know about each of these selections. So this is Over There.
Get your gun, take it on the run, on the run, on
And so that song, as you know, was also used for recruitment, but it was also used for a morale booster, and it served its purpose wonderfully. The next tune, though, takes another turn where it's looking at the war from the emotional standpoint. And in this tune, you'll hear that there's a sentimentality that we don't put in songs anymore, and you can hear that the song is a little bit dated, but that doesn't take away at all from the emotion of the song. Sending a son off to war, and what happens. So, Adam Bamorian is going to be singing God Be With Our Boys Tonight, lyrics by Fred Boyle and a English composer, Wilfred Sanderson.
Brave eyes that look so tenderly, where are you now today? Sad were our thoughts at break of dawn, after you went away. Loud sang the lark o'er fields of gold, high in the hen above. We let her alone within our hearts, calling for you we love. Oh, waiting heart, I cannot tell how dark and long the lane. Only I know that time will bring our dear ones back again, safe to a home of peace and light across the furthest sea. May God be with our boys tonight, wherever they may be. Brave ones who answered your country's call, how could we let you go? Out of the sunshine of our souls, save that we love you so. There is a place within our hearts no one on earth may fill. Someday at last you'll come back to us, watching and longing still. Oh, waiting heart, I cannot tell how dark and long the lane. Only I know that time will bring our dear ones back again, safe to a home of peace and light across the furthest sea. May God be with our boys tonight, wherever they may be.
And now another tune that was well known during this time period. And it was again the sentimentality of home and thinking of the soldiers and coming home and having them come back to what they knew and what they felt comfortable with. You were talking about how people were homesick, and this was a song that sort of dealt with that. Another one of the most popular tunes, and the other interesting thing about this is that not only was it a popular song to buy and to play in the home, but also there started to become this beautiful thing called recordings. And recordings started to also enter into the home. And this is Keep the Home Fires Burning. And this is sung by Dalton Fowler. So, Adam has come back up.
Not the best piano.
Yeah, yes, it works for this situation. So, Adam is going to sing a song of the time period, and I ask you that as you're looking at the exhibit to find this piece, and it's called When the Band Plays Yankee Doodle. Now, in researching this, I found that there was a When the Band Plays Yankee Doodle Do, it's not that song, or When the Band Plays Yankee Doodle in Berlin, which again, that's not this song. But what this is a patter song about patriotism. And it's just a romp. There's a lot of text. So we're going to have as much fun as we possibly can. So this is the end of the selection, so thanks again for listening.
the songs of every nation. There's a feeling comes a stealing when they're played. You can't keep your feet from going, full of pride and joy you're growing. It's a spirit that I like to see displayed. If the flags on high are flying, everyone around is sighing, you will find a sunny smile on every face. For this patriotic passion is a never-changing fashion, but for everything there is a time and place. There's one especial time in my own case. When the band plays Yankee Doodle, I go fairly off my noodle and begin to spend my noodle in a Yankee Doodle way, with 3 cheers for the red, white and blue, for the Army and Navy and you. You can get the crowd together most any kind of weather when the band plays Yankee Doodle Doo. When I see a band assemble, I at once begin to tremble. I don't know it, but I show it very plain. I get nervous and excited. If a cannon came, I'd fight it. There's a whizzing going round within my brain. When my heart goes pitter-patter, I know right well what's the matter, but I can't control myself when once I start. 'Cause I know they'll get me going if the cornets start a-blowing that Yankee tune that goes right to the heart. That's the reason I get restless ere they start. When the band plays Yankee Doodle, I go fairly off my noodle, and I begin to spend my poodle in a Yankee Doodle way, with 3 cheers for the red, white and blue, for the Army and Navy and you. You can get the crowd together most any kind of weather when the band plays Yankee Doodle Doo. When the band plays Yankee Doodle, I go fairly off my noodle and begin to spend my poodle in a Yankee Doodle way, with 3 cheers for the red, white and blue, for the Army and Navy